Hello, everyone, and welcome back to this masterclass in association with global compliance provider TMF Group and co-produced by FDI Intelligence and the bank. And once again, joined in our studio in London by Mark Weil, the CEO of TMF Group. Welcome back, Mark.
Thank you.
This is chapter 3 of our masterclass, and today we will discuss the way the global economy is emerging from the COVID-19 pandemic. As we speak, to my knowledge, the only major economy that is still under strict COVID-19 restrictions is China. Anywhere else, we are somewhat back to some normality or a new normality. This also means that countries around the world are phasing out the kind of exceptional measures that implemented during the pandemic, fiscal measures, monetary measures to support businesses and investment. What kind of challenges, also from a regulatory standpoint, do you see in this transition out of the pandemic and back to a normality or a new normal, if you may?
Well, so first of all, just to confirm, there was a real spike in support schemes. So we wanted to be helpful to our clients when the COVID crisis began. And my suggestion was we started listing those schemes just to give links, application help, details. It started with about 20, but around the world we were at something like 1,500 schemes at peak. And those are largely now gone. There are some countries where they're still in place, but with an end date in sight. So we've seen schemes come and go. And that's to be expected. A lot of those schemes were around making sure businesses didn't unnecessarily go bust or their employees were protected. And in general, world employment stayed high. So you could argue that they've worked, or at least they contributed to that outcome. So the main tactical issue is just to be aware that as those schemes drop off, that you're aware of entering new countries, what schemes are available, which are not, and just manage the transition. But I don't see any particular problem about managing that transition, having adopted a scheme to then working through its end.
TMF Group, one of its services is payroll. You handle and manage the payroll of hundreds of thousands of people around the world. One of the characteristics of this phase is really this a tight labor market in major economies. Somebody also labeled it as the Great Resignation to emphasize this tightness. Do you see this tightness from your observatory? Do you see salary inflation being a real issue across geographies?
Yeah, so we have that data by country. I think it's a little more nuanced than maybe the headline suggested. If you look at different economies, there are economies where inflation has stayed very low, employment levels have stayed fairly typical, and there are others which are running hot. And so you have both inflation and high employment. In some of those cases with the prospect of recession or at least GDP coming off. And so who knows how that will play out in terms of the labor market. But so we're seeing a mixed patchwork of countries, some with high attrition and labor inflation from a sort of employer point of view, and others where that's not the case. So you just need to look at individual countries. Asia, for example, still quite a lot of low inflation, lower labor turnover than, say, Europe, North America.
Okay, Mark, I think that also another interesting element in this post-pandemic global economy is also the expectation in the population that governments will do what it takes to find a solution to big-scale problems like the pandemic before, and now it could be inflation and also recession. So this could be like new interventions in the monetary market, new fiscal interventions. Would you agree with that? And with what does this mean for companies when they have to navigate this fluid regulatory environment?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think there's writ large what's been opened up is an expectation from the public, from voters, that governments will intervene much more in economies than maybe they would have historically chosen to, at least in some places. And that means, if you're entering a new country, you now have there have been positives in the pandemic of governments going out of their way to help companies through it. But in a period of high inflation, particularly food, energy prices, you can imagine price controls, windfall taxes, that kind of agenda, which might be rather less welcome. And again, that's a form of informal complexity. It won't be in the rule book for how to do business in, but you have to look at the governments in question, ask yourselves the pressures they're under, what might we be exposed to in that particular location, and factoring that into your investment plans.
Okay, thank you, Mark. This is it also for chapter 3 of our masterclass. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. In the next and final episode, we will discuss Mark's expectations for the future of for the long-term trends in complexity, business complexities, and for indirect investment. Thank you, everyone, and until the next time.